Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Bear Arms in Scottsdale, Arizona, taking a look at a very cool factory machine gun from their reference collection. Specifically, this is a Portuguese-made FMP HK21. This is essentially the squad support version of the G3, and it's the first of HK's roller-delayed blowback machine guns, support weapons, as opposed to just rifles. So HK first put the G3 into mass production in 1959 to supply an order for 150,000, and further orders would come, for the West German Bundeswehr. But they were also, at essentially the same time, they were also making guns for export to other countries that were looking for new small arms. Now, the Bundeswehr didn't need a new machine gun. They had the MG3, which was essentially the MG42 converted over to 7.62 NATO. They're very happy with it. It's an excellent gun. HK wasn't going to sell them machine guns. But for a lot of H&K's smaller clients, a lot of countries, especially in Africa, the idea of having a family of small arms where the rifle and the machine gun shared significant parts commonality as well as handling and training similarities, there's a very real benefit to that. And it frankly was something that a lot of the small arms systems of this Cold War era, 1950s, 60s, 70s, a lot of them did this. The AK is a classic example. You have the regular AK as a rifle, you have the folding stocked AK as the submachine gun sort of variant, and then you have the RPK with a longer, heavier barrel, a different butt stock as the light machine gun support weapon. But fundamentally, they all work the same way. They all have the same manual of arms, and they interchange a lot of parts. G3 was intended to be the same way, and this was the support weapon version. The submachine gun version, of course, would come not that much later with the MP5. Anyway, these were first introduced in 1961. Portugal was a major purchaser of G3 rifles. They were one of the big early clients for HK. They adopted the G3 as the Model 961, and then an improved slightly later version as Model 1964. They adopted the HK21 as a light machine gun to go with it in 1968. Portugal also went a bit further and purchased a license to manufacture these guns themselves, the G3s as well as the HK21s, at the FMP factory. That's Fábrica Militar de Portugal. And so this one was manufactured in Portugal in 1971. Now, like I said, this is the first version of HK's belt-fed guns, and later iterations would be substantially improved, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video. But for now, let's focus on the fact that we have essentially the minimum number of changes required to turn a G3 into a belt-fed gun. So there are substantial parts interchangeabilities. I saw the number 48% parts interchangeable with a G3 rifle. I can't specifically speak to that, but while the buttstock is slightly different, it's got a wider butt plate on it, it's got lugs back here for attaching to a tripod. It is interchangeable with a G3 bipod, or a G3 buttstock. The grip assembly is interchangeable with a G3. The flash hider is the same. The front sight's the same. The charging handle is different but interchangeable. You can swap HK21 and G3 charging handles back and forth. Things like the cocking tube, which doesn't come off as a separate part, but during the manufacturing process, that's interchangeable. Like, that's the goal they were going for, is to make it as efficient as possible and give you a belt-fed support weapon. So this was available in 7.62 NATO, just like the G3s. There were conversion kits available to convert it to 5.56 or 7.62 by 39, the latter being, I don't think, ever really manufactured in quantity, but it was prototyped at least. But this is a gun that really is only intended for 7.62 NATO. Anyway, let's dig into this a little closer. Let me pull it apart, show you how it works. All right, let's start with some markings on the top here. This is where HK marks its military guns. We have HK21. FMP, of course, is the Portuguese factory, serial number, and the date of manufacture, which is February 1971. This gun, by the way, is not a parts kit build. This is a factory original HK21 that is currently registered as a post-86 dealer sample. So that's how it legally exists in the United States. Now, if we start at the back, you can see that the buttstock here, the butt pad specifically, is widened out to give it a little more surface area, to be a little more comfortable to shoot, but it otherwise is the same buttstock. We have two lugs here on the back that will lock it into a tripod for a sustained fire roll. standard selector. The whole fire control group is a standard one, so safe, semi-auto, and full auto. It is cool to have this with a semi-auto setting. That's something you don't always see on machine guns, and being mechanically identical to a G3, this is a closed bolt firing gun. So in some ways that will limit its sustained fire capability, but it does also mean that it's capable of much more accurate single shot fire. We have reinforcement plates here on the receiver. We got one above the belt mechanism, one back here, and those are just done to help endure the much more significant forces put on this by regular use of full auto compared to a G3 rifle. Instead of the drum sort of diopter sight of a G3, the 21 has a rear aperture sight there with an elevation wheel that has a minimum setting of 200 meters and can be adjusted all the way up to 1200 meters. The front sight is exactly the same as a G3. In fact, the front sight block there is pretty much the same. Moving forward a bit, we have our belt feed mechanism, which is integral to the receiver. Later versions, which again I'll talk about in a minute, will have a really modular assembly here. The original HK21 does not. This piece can be removed, and I'll take it out in a minute, but the receiver is dedicated to use as a belt-fed gun. This is an attachment point for the bipod, which can be mounted at either the front or the back. This one is currently obviously set up at the front. You've got some pivot there. The bipod legs snap into position there. And if I want to take this off, I just have a little spring-loaded tab here. I push that down, and I can rotate the bipod assembly completely off the gun. So we've got some nice big feet to dig into the ground to keep the gun stable. But otherwise, like, the locking mechanism here is the same as the folding bipod that was available for the G3. Got our charging handle, again, just like the regular G3. We'll go ahead and lock that open at the moment because we also have a quick change barrel. We'll handle on it so that you can manipulate the barrel while it's hot. In order to remove it, what you do is pull in this button, which unlocks it, rotate it up, and then you can pull the barrel back and out this big open side slot in the receiver there. So there's our standard barrel. Heavy profile barrel, but it's got the same standard flash hider as a regular G3. Note that we have this little pin on the barrel. I'll remember that for a moment from now. Disassembly is just like a G3. We just push these pins out and pull the buttstock off. There we go. You got your captive recoil spring there. Buttstock assembly. I can then pop this pin, and that lets me remove my fire control grip, pistol grip assembly. Then the bolt carrier and bolt head come out the back. Here's where we do have a very specific difference from the regular G3 rifle component. The bolt carrier here has this additional cam track cut in it, and that's to operate the belt feed mechanism. And I noted that pin on the barrel face, this guy right here. The purpose of that is the bolt will only go all the way into battery if the barrel has been inserted and then locked downward into place. So that hole and that pin are a safety mechanism to prevent you from firing the gun when the barrel is not fully locked, which would result in the barrel going flying out of the gun downrange, which would be embarrassing. The roller delay mechanism here is exactly the same as a G3. If you're not familiar with it, I've got some other videos about that, rather than go into it in detail here. Now we have our belt feed mechanism here. Note that it feeds from the left side, essentially because in order to remain parts compatible, it's going to use the same ejection port, the same ejection mechanism. So it's going to eject out the right, which means you don't want it feeding and ejecting on the same side. So belt goes in on the left, empty belt links or belt come out here, empty cases come out there. We have this kind of neat little latch. I rotate that up, and then I can pull this whole unit out. The equivalent of a feed tray cover is left in there. So this is the top of the feeding unit, and I can pull that out by just pushing this lever down, and then it'll fall right out the bottom. So there's that. If we take a little bit of a closer look here, you can see we have a feed sprocket. So the belt's going to come in and be held in place by this. This peg right here is controlled by this guy. So this is going to cycle side to side, which causes this rotating pawl to advance. So as the bolt goes back and forth, the belt gets pulled in from the side. You got a roller here just to keep everything smooth. Like, not a whole lot to that. All right, and that leaves us with our stripped receiver here. So you can see that this is fundamentally based on the G3 receiver, especially back here. They've welded a bunch more stuff onto the front that you wouldn't normally need on a G3. This, by the way, is the front tripod attachment for it. And this is not a configurable receiver. So the mounting block for the belt system is integral to the receiver. So there were conversion kits to turn this into other calibers. They were not particularly common. There was an adapter block that you could put in here to allow the gun to use regular G3 magazines. It was also not particularly common. Definitely, this is a gun you would be intending to use in its belt-fed role. After this came out, by the way, the nomenclature on this, HK21, 2 refers to the build configuration as a light machine gun, and 1 refers to the caliber, 7.62 NATO. It would take HK a little while to really solidify their nomenclature. Eventually, you would have the HK 11, 21, 13, and 23, with the 21 being this, the belt-fed 7.62 NATO, the 11 being mag-fed 7.62 NATO, and the 3s, the 13 and the 23, being 5.56 guns. But there you go. There is the HK21 all field stripped. Pretty easy gun to take apart. It does have that HK level of modularity, just not quite the modularity that would come with later iterations of this concept. In actual use, the HK21 is not a particularly comfortable, fun, easy gun to shoot. It has a fairly brutal hammering recoil. The rate of fire is 800, 850 rounds a minute, which is fairly high. And the receiver is, I mean, the original G3 receiver wasn't even designed for 7.62 NATO. It was originally designed by the Spanish for a much lighter recoiling cartridge. And they had to kind of make some workarounds and some adjustments and some tweaks and stretch the capabilities of this receiver to fit 7.62 NATO. So when you take that and then bump it up to a fully automatic belt-fed support weapon, it's not a beginner's gun to shoot. And the complaints about this would resonate because HK, over the next 20 years, made a number of changes and improvements to this, ultimately resulting in the HK21E for export, where, among other things, they stretched the receiver a little bit longer so that you had a little bit more bolt travel, so you had a little more deceleration available before the bolt slammed into the back of the receiver and kicked all that recoil into the shooter. The 21Es are also way more modular. You can take out the feed mechanism more easily, replace it with different calibers, replace it with magazines. It is a far better gun in a lot of both large-scale and small-scale ways. But the 21 here, the standard basic HK21 from the 1960s, is where that whole system originated. These saw substantial combat use in the Portuguese colonies in Africa. Portugal had a couple of different colonies. They were fighting there from 1961 until 1974, when political change in Portugal brought an end to those wars. HK did have other clients for the HK21 besides Portugal, but they were mostly small countries, and most of them were African countries. You get countries like Nigeria, Cameroon, Qatar, not African, but Qatar bought some of these. It's a gun that was hard to shoot well, but it was durable, it was reliable, and it was parts interchangeable in many ways with the G3 rifles, which a lot of these smaller countries also liked. They're very good rifles for austere environments, and the HK21 was kind of the natural companion piece to them. So, on the scale of HK machine guns today, the 21 is seen as basically the least desirable of them because it has the least flexibility and the fewest number of improvements. It's their first attempt. To me, though, this is one of the most interesting guns because it does represent that initial idea of how to make a gun like this. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'd like to give again a big thanks to Bear Arms for giving me access to it to film for you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.